The Apprentice Warden is the newest Dark Elixir troop in Clash of Clans, with him coming out in June of 2023, and honestly, it feels like no one is really even talking about him. He hasn't gotten any sort of balance changes since he came out, and he also just hasn't really been shown in any artwork or loading screens, unlike a lot of the other troops in the game, and it really feels like Supercell just neglected him to focus on other things. And today, we're going to be going over the Apprentice Warden and why it seems like Supercell just doesn't care about him, so let's get right into it. Apprentice Warden is obviously based off of the Grand Warden, who is arguably the most important hero in the current meta at the higher Town Hall levels, where the Apprentice Warden is, since you unlock him at Town Hall 13. And Apprentice Warden is really just a weaker version of the Grand Warden. His life aura isn't as good as the Grand Warden's, and he also does less damage, plus he doesn't have an air mode and can't make troops invincible. But obviously this is to be expected, since they obviously can't make a normal troop as strong as a hero, and he is an apprentice for a reason. Though it is a bit weird how the Apprentice Warden calls Dark Elixir and the normal Warden calls Normal Elixir, so maybe that hints at that the Apprentice Warden may have just been added for the sake of adding in a new Dark Elixir troop or something, or maybe Supercell just has some other reason for this, but it isn't really too important. The one main problem that the Apprentice Warden had when he first came out was the fact that his aura couldn't stack with the Grand Warden's aura, which in most cases really just meant the Apprentice Warden would be pretty useless in most armies, since the Grand Warden typically does stay alive for a large part of the battle. And with 20 housing space, the Apprentice Warden also just couldn't really be used as a mini warden for assisting funnel troops to make them last longer, since the housing space just wouldn't really be worth it. And as for the best funneler in the game, which is the Archer Queen, she obviously would just have a couple of healers behind her, and in that situation, an extra like 30% health wouldn't really do too much with the healers there, since once the healers died, the queen wouldn't be able to last much longer with or without the 30% health boost. So this obviously kind of limited the usage of the Apprentice Warden and made him much more of a niche troop, and I think the main way people really used him was just as a replacement for the Grand Warden whenever he was upgrading, since the Apprentice Wardens could be pretty useful in that case. However, it still wouldn't really be enough. And this honestly was surprising to me how Supercell didn't give him any sort of buffs after seeing that he didn't fully fit into the game too well, since normally troops would have gotten at least some buffs or changes after devs saw that they didn't work as well as they had hoped. So this also kind of pushed towards the Apprentice Warden just being neglected by the devs. But they would end up indirectly receiving a pretty massive buff that has kind of brought them back into the game and made them way more useful, but I'll get to that a little later on. First, I want to go over what I really think is the main reason why the Apprentice Warden has kind of been neglected, and that is actually because the Clash of Clans development team has just grown a ton, and all of this happened around when the Apprentice Warden was obviously being developed and released, which was like the middle of 2023. And we know this because the CEO of Supercell announced that the Clash of Clans team was going to be expanding a lot in early 2023, and by late 2023 it was announced that the team had roughly doubled in size, meaning that in between that period is where most of the hiring and everything happened, and when things would have been super busy within the company. And what I think really happened is just that the Apprentice Warden ended up getting released, but a ton of people had gotten moved around and there were more people, and he just ended up kind of getting overlooked. And obviously I know that they are a massive company and everyone could have just simply forgotten about the Apprentice Warden, but I more so mean that they probably started on a bunch of new things and got so busy with that new stuff that not many people really even cared about the Apprentice Warden that much. And like some of these new things that they could have gotten busy with would be like all the events we have been seeing, and obviously the whole addition of Town Hall 16, which brought another new troop as well as new mechanics, with the main one being the hero equipment. And all of this stuff would understandably take the attention away from the Apprentice Warden, since all of this was really just much more important and would really have a bigger impact on the players of the game, since since like it wasn't limited to only Tunnel 13 and higher. But it would also be the hero equipment that would actually end up being the indirect buff that Hyatt mentioned earlier, and another reason as to why Supercell probably is just going to continue not really caring about or focusing on the Apprentice Warden. So with the equipment, you could now basically change and get rid of the original abilities that the heroes had and get new things, and that meant for the Grand Warden, you could get rid of his Life Aura ability, which comes in the form of the Life Gem, and instead you could go and replace that with the Rage Gem, and this obviously will make his aura give all troops a bit of a damage boost rather than a health boost. And this way the Warden would still be able to use his Eternal Tomb ability, which is definitely the most important one. And this is also where the Apprentice Wardens come in, since you can kind of use them like a substitute, and this way you get best of both worlds, and if used right, this strategy can be extremely powerful and effective. And obviously this doesn't just completely rule out the Life Aura ability for the Grand Warden, since that is still a lot better for certain armies, mainly the air ones like Lava Loon or something with dragons, and this obviously means the Apprentice Warden still isn't that good over there. But when it comes to some of the ground armies, the Apprentice Warden and Rage Gem Grand Warden combo can really be very powerful, and this is the main way that the Apprentice Warden is kind of coming back into the game, and how Supercell didn't really even need to do anything directly to him to make this happen. So far, we have gotten over why the Apprentice Warden wasn't really that used when he came out, and how he managed to make a comeback, all while Supercell never really directly made any changes to it, and how this could have just been because they were focusing on new things with a bigger team, but that isn't exactly fully convincing about how Apprentice Warden became neglected. So there is also another thing that kind of shows how Supercell haven't really been paying attention to Apprentice Warden, and that is actually with things outside of the game like the artwork and animations and stuff. Obviously he had a custom animation made for him celebrating his release, but since then there really hasn't been anything. I mean, with pretty much every other troop, maybe other than the Headhunter, they have at least been shown in multiple other pieces of artwork or have been featured in various animations, but the Apprentice Warden really seems like the only one who hasn't. And this could be because he is relatively new, but I mean it has been quite some time now and there hasn't really been anything new, which really makes me think that he has been neglected by Supercell. And a final reason is also the fact that he is one of the few troops that doesn't have a super troop version of themselves, and also doesn't have anything similar at all in either the builder base or the clan capital, or honestly even in any of the other Supercell games like Clash Royale, which normally shares a lot of similarities with a lot of the troops, spells, buildings, and everything from Clash of Clans, since both of those games are obviously very similar. But honestly, I really do like the concept of the Apprentice Warden and think he is a really cool troop that should definitely be getting more attention right now, since I think he can really open the door for even more troops like King for many versions of other heroes in the game. And I know that there obviously are the normal Barbarian and Archer for the King and Queen, so maybe those wouldn't work the best, but surely there could be something for the Royal Champion, since I think it would be really cool to get a mini version of her that can like throw a shield at maybe just 2 defenses instead of the 4 that the Royal Champion does, or something similar. But yeah, there obviously is a bunch that could happen, and I really would like for Apprentice Warden to get some more love, but I also may just be looking too deep into it, and maybe the reason we haven't seen much new stuff with him is just because he is a newer troop. But let me know what you guys think down below in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.